Hey guys, this is Will Doggett, Director of Training and Development and Ableton Live Certified Trainer. Thanks so much for joining us for our Ableton Live 4 Keys webinar. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while, and I think we're going to have a really good time. Now, I want to set up kind of what the purpose of this webinar is going to be, what it's going to look like. There's only so much time. I can't get into everything I want to. Earlier today, kind of looking at the schedule, I had to cut a few things out. So don't worry. Here's what I want you guys to do. If we're talking about something and you go, man, I wish we could talk about this or talk about that, make sure to leave a comment wherever you're watching and let us know. And what we'll do is afterwards we'll get on and we'll make a video. YouTube is a wonderful thing, so we'll post tons of videos there. But I'm incredibly excited for today. So I'm surrounded by tons and tons of great gear. And so we're going to talk about how to use all this with Ableton Live. The purpose of today really is to talk about using Live as a host, as a way, kind of a central hub, where no matter what plugins we're using, no matter what sounds, whether internal Ableton Suite sounds or external gear, we can connect all those to Ableton Live, and Live can control all of those, which is going to be great. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So before we go too far into this, let me take you through my setup and what I'm doing. So obviously I'm using Ableton Live. I'm running Ableton Live Suite. Everything I'm going to show you today with the only thing, some of the instrument stuff is just included in Suite, but all the features I'm going to show you are available both in standard and in Suite. Some of the stuff is not available in intro. So if you're on intro watching this, don't fret, don't worry, just try to do it. And if you can't do it and you go, that's the thing I really need, then bump up to standard or Suite. I always tell people when you're on intro, it's a great place to start for running tracks, but then when you hit some sort of barrier, move on to standard or Suite. So I'm using Ableton Live 9, this is 9.7 Suite. I have my Ableton Push 2 connected directly to my computer. And so I'm using this just to control some different sounds and to control some different filters and stuff on pads, which you'll see here in a second. And then I have my Nord, I think it's the Nord Stage 2. What is this guy? Nord Stage 2 EX. I was about to say Nord Stage 3, but that doesn't exist yet. I think we saw 2 at GearFest, and those are the only 2 apparently that are in existence at the time we saw that. Nord Stage 2 EX, I'm mainly using this as a controller, so I can play this. I'm not using sounds right now from the Nord. I'm using some piano sounds from Live, but using this primarily as my controller. Every time I do this, someone says, man, you got that awesome Nord right there. Why are you not using it? This is not mine. If I had it, I probably would use more sounds from it, but I'm using this to control Live. Next is this guy. This guy is the iConnectivity Mio 4. This is kind of the central hub of everything I'm doing. This has all my MIDI connections here plugged into this. And this has multiple DIN and USB ports. And the way I have this connected is I have the Nord into the Mio in and out 3. And then I have this Moog sub 37. There we go. Nice low end. That is out of Mio port 2. And so I'm just sending MIDI out of here into the sub 37, just so you guys can get that. And I'm using my all clear in-ears, which the universal ones, I'm not sure which model, but loving those guys. Those for about a week and enjoying that. So that's a bit of my setup. That's what I'm going to be using today, and you'll get to hear bits and pieces of that. But let's start at the very beginning and talk about, if you want to use Ableton Live for keys, how do we connect our keyboard to Live? So in this case, again, I'm using the Nord. And I've got this connected to my computer. It's connected through the Mio 4, but even if we're just going to do USB-N, if we had a Disaster Area Designs DMC6D, if we did a Kai MPK 61, whatever keyboard you have, plug that into your computer. We have to do a couple things and change a few settings before we get into that. So let's go over to Live here, and I'll take you through some of those settings and some of those changes. So first thing you want to do when you plug in a USB controller is you want to go to Live's preference pane. So the best way to get there is you could go up to the File menu if you're on a Mac. If you're on a PC, I think it's in the Options area. Let us know in the comments if you know what that is. I always forget when we're talking about a PC. But that is how you get to the menu. Command, comma, or Control, comma is also our keyboard shortcut to get to that. And that's something, throughout this, I'm going to be mentioning different keyboard shortcuts, how to get to specific things. Make sure you grab those, because that's going to help you work really well, help you work really quickly, which is going to be great. So here in preference pane, we're going to plug this in. We want to go to the MIDI tab. So right here is the link MIDI tab. First thing I want to talk about is this control surface area. I am not a huge fan of the control surface area, and I did a video not too long ago where I showed how to set up a redundant rig setup in Ableton Live, and was showing how to do this, and someone commented afterwards and said, man, why did he not use the control surface? Why did he not just use what was preset in there? I don't like using the control surface things because I like to be able to customize that. So I typically stay away from the control surface. Now, when I'm using Ableton Push, that's when I go in and I make sure my setup is correct here. Control surface push to, and just to know which port is connected there. So that's what that is connected to. The benefit of using the control surface is if you have an Akai MPK keyboard, you plug it in, it's going to automatically pre-map. Again, if you're like me and you don't like using the preset stuff, you can disable that, but it's a good way to get started. So I'm going to skip that for now. Takeover mode we're going to come back to, but this is really important as well. So now we have a set of inputs and outputs. So for me, the inputs here are all the MIDI inputs that we have connected, and the outputs are all the possible outputs we have. Now, because I'm using this Mio 4, there are tons of options available to me. But the main thing I have is I only want to receive MIDI in from this Mio 4 DIN 3 port. And that is the port that the Nord is connected to. So when I play the Nord, that's going to send MIDI from the Nord into here. Let me take a second and talk through this track sync in remote. These are important to make sure we understand the difference between these three and which one is which. So the first one, track. Now, if I want to use a keyboard to record, and I want to use something that I can plug in and trigger MIDI sounds, then track is what I want to enable. Track is the thing that's going to allow me to press a key, and it's going to allow me to trigger that sound. So enabling track is the one you want to enable if you want to use a MIDI controller to trigger your keys sounds. So Nord, I have track enabled so that you can hear and see that. Now the next one, sync. What sync does is sync is the way to receive MIDI time information, right? So that's going to sync Ableton Live. If I have sync enabled there, that's going to make sure that Ableton Live is receiving sync information from a keyboard. So I could set a tempo here, could set a tempo on push on my Moog, so that Ableton Live is synced to that. Our last one here, remote. This is really, really simple, really easy to understand. If I want to use something to remotely control live, maybe I'm on my Moog Sub 37. I have a bunch of knobs and controls over here. If I want to use these to control something in live, then I want to make sure I enable remote. So a lot of times people plug in controllers and go, hey, I wanted to use my Disaster Area Designs DMC6D to control live remotely. You need to make sure remote is enabled to do that. So in this scenario, on my input, I have the Nord enabled for track. I have sync turned on for network. I must have been doing some sort of MIDI sync there. I'm not doing that right now. And the IAC driver, I have remote enabled so that I can do like a stop track or something with IAC if I wanted. Now, if I wanted to send, let's say MIDI beat information, tempo information out to a guitar pedal, that's where on my outputs, I would enable sync there. So it's important to make sure you understand the difference between our MIDI inputs and our MIDI outputs there. So plug your MIDI controller in. If we're gonna do this, play a key and trigger a sound in live, we wanna make sure on that input that track is enabled, which it is. Now let me talk about our last setting here, value scaling. This is really important, especially when you play pad sounds, right? Value scaling, let me jump into user mode here on my push for a second and show you what I mean by this. I'm gonna set value scaling to none, and I'm just gonna load in this pad sound. So this is what this sounds like, right? Super bright pad. And I'm going to bring this filter down, and let's bring the volume down just slightly on this guy. So my takeover mode here is set to none, and I'm going to MIDI map the volume for this guy to this knob. Let's see if we can do that. And let's actually enable this port on our push so that we can do this. Okay, so we got this guy. Oop, let's see if we can find something here. There we go. So you can see if you're looking, yep, you're looking at my screen. Input here, Ableton Live push, remote was not enabled. So as soon as I enable that, watch what happens. Volume, and I'm going to turn this knob, and we're mapped. So now just so you can see this knob on my push, I'm in user mode, which we hit up here. This is just using live as just a basic MIDI controller. This is now mapped to my volume. Let's see if I can find that guy. There we go. Oh, let's map this one. Now we should be good. Perfect. Oh, and I'm going to play this piano sound. There we go. So now I'm triggering this. There's my volume. You can hear that changing, right? Now, when MIDI takeover mode is set to none, here's what happens. Let's set my volume here really low. I'm going to play, and I just want to just slightly move this knob on the push. And as soon as I do, it's going to jump to that value. See how it's jumping really quickly. I don't want that to happen. I want this to be a smooth transition. Now, when I set the takeover mode to pickup, and this is what I believe live used to be set to by default, and people, typically would like this. But on pickup, what stinks is I have to wait for a certain portion, a certain time, to where my knob on my MIDI controller matches what's in Ableton Live. So if this is at a different place than what's in Live, it's not going to be great. So the pickup mode that we want to use that's going to work the best here is value scaling. Value scaling is going to do some crazy math so that if I'm all the way down here and I slightly move this knob up, it's going to do the math to say, okay, he moved 20, 30%, and that's going to do all that live on the fly, which is really, really nice. So for takeover mode, I would encourage you to set that to value scaling. That's really important when we're talking about pad stuff, and we're controlling sounds in live with a controller that has faders. That fader can only be in a certain place, so that's an important thing to look at and to talk about. So let me clear this back so we get back to kind of where we were here. All right, and I'll get out of user mode on my push, so we're kind of set back up. We have our sounds going and ready to go. So now let's dig in and let's talk about how to use live. Now that we've got our content, everything connected and ready to go, let's talk about how to use live for key sounds. So the very first thing I want to do is just create a basic pad sound. This is similar to something, a video I did quite a while back. And I want to preface this. When I did this the last time, it's a video on YouTube you've probably seen. A lot of people come and say, what sound are you using at the beginning? And the point is, it doesn't matter what sound I start with, it's what we do afterwards that really matters. So I'm going to start a new live set here. We don't need to save this. And I'm just going to load in a operator instrument. And again, this could be any keyboard preset. And live, it doesn't matter exactly what we have. I'm just going to use an operator preset right now. All right, cool. So operators loaded in. This is what our default sound sounds like. Let's pull up a wave here. Right, so pretty nasty, not a great sounding pad. Right, super loud too. I'll turn that down. Not very good sounding. But here's what I want to do. The great thing about creating pad sounds, the kind of secret formula to this is a auto filter and a reverb. That's all we need. If we can put a reverb on a sound and filter it out a little bit, it's going to become a usable pad, which is great. So I'm going to actually use something that we just released this week called Ableton Effects. And Ableton Effects is a effects rack that has a lot of very useful sounds and sounds that help you transform and change any sort of audio to something completely different. What's built into Ableton Effects is reverb by default, and it also is going to give me a filter. So let me turn this off for a second, play my sound. Right? That's my sound. Again, not great. Now I'm going to turn Ableton Effects and start making some changes, and let's see what happens here. Okay, so first with our reverb, we're going to turn our reverb amount to 100%, so we get a really washed out kind of sound. It's sounding a little better. Okay, now I'm going to increase the decay. I like doing that because it kind of lets everything wash around a little bit, bleed into itself, and create kind of, again, a really nice washy pad. And then we have our filter here. So what's cool about this, and this is my favorite thing about using push for key sounds, is instead of having to touch my computer and adjust this, I have everything I need pre-mapped right here to the settings. I can see it. If you're going to use Ableton Live for key stuff, the best controller you can buy, MIDI controller, is a Ableton Push. This is a Push 2. So I'm going to reach up right here and grab filter and just start to filter this sound out. So as I filter this out, it's becoming a little more usable, right? And we have shimmer built in. Every worship leader, every worship pad has to have some shimmer there. So let's bring that in. Right, just for kicks and giggles, because I'm using the Ableton Effects, I'm going to select Effect 1, which is kind of a sidechain effect, and I can choose to blend that in a little. Right, so now I have a sidechain pad. And then I can change the routing from either going to effects into ambience or ambience into effects. You can hear it kind of reset there. So this is washier because I'm doing the effect into ambience. And 1 is going to be a lot more drastic because I'm putting the effect after the ambience. So you can see how easy it is to tweak and change those sounds, so it's really nice. So that's just a pad sound using Ableton effects to kind of tweak it to make it kind of work for what we're doing. It's a pretty good sound. Now the next thing I want to do is bring in a piano sound here. And I'm going to choose a sound from the Reflective Pianos collection, available on multitracks.com. And this is just the emotional piano. So this is a bit of what this sounds like. It's really a piano that's made to kind of fill that space of something that can be used for altar calls. It's meant to kind of be played really softly. I have a filter programmed into here so I could filter some of the highs out. And again, that makes it really, really usable. Okay, so there's my piano sound. So I have a pad sound and I have a piano sound. Now, what's great about this is I could use this live. I could trigger both of these sounds live if I wanted to, and I can just switch between these two on the push. So let's start with the pad here. Again, let me bring some of our effect down, a little less sidechained. Actually, let's take it all the way out. Right, now I can switch to my piano sound. Now, you can see I'm starting to run into an issue here though. Okay. So the problem is when I switch key sounds like that, it starts to get muddy, right? Because when I'm on this sound, and if you look at the push, what I'm doing is just basically arming and selecting these tracks. So when I arm this guy, this operator here, right, and I hold out this chord with my sustain pedal, and I switch to the other sound, basically what's recorded into there is the sustain information. I don't want that. So to kill it, I have to go back to here, hit my sustain pedal, and it dies. Now that's not a great way to do this, because what if I want to blend these two sounds together? How do I do that? So I want to talk about a great way to do that, and that's going to get us into something called instrument racks. Now instrument racks is kind of the secret sauce of using keys in Ableton Live. It's going to allow us to layer sounds together. The way I like to think of it is an instrument rack is a bit like a wrapper. It's going to wrap everything together into one so that it's really, really easy to use. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. First, I'm going to start with my pad sound here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just group these sounds together. And again, I'll mention if you guys have any questions, make sure to put those in the chat, wherever you're watching. And Tim will either answer them, he's monitoring the chat room now, or we'll come back and get to those here in a moment. So make sure to post your questions there. All right, so on this operator, I'm going to select this and then select the Ableton effects. And I'm going to hit Shift and then select both of those guys. And I'm going to do Command G or Control G if I'm on a PC. And what happens is that puts both of those into an instrument rack. And then I want to go and save this, and let's call this pad sound. Okay, we'll hit this save button here. That's going to save in my user library under presets, instruments, and operator. What's cool about that is now I can come back to that and access that no matter what live project, no matter what live file I have open. I just open that up, go to the user library, and I have access to that sound now, which is cool. Now, emotional piano, I think this guy is ready to go. It's all together. So let me talk about how to put these two together now. So what I'm going to do with this instrument rack, we save this, we have emotional piano. I'm going to create a new MIDI track, Command Shift T, and then I'm going to go over to instruments, and I'm going to drop in a instrument rack. And again, an instrument rack by default is just a wrapper. There's really nothing there. And then what I want to go is to my first instrument rack, which is my pad sound. And I'm just going to drag this into this instrument rack. Now watch what I do here in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm not going to drag this and replace it. Right? If I do this, it replaced that instrument rack. What I want to do is drop it right here where it says drop an instrument or sample here. And if I drop that here, that's where that sound is going to go. So let's do that again. Take this here. Don't drop it here, but drop it right there. You'll see that that line show up, drop an instrument or sample here. Now that is going to add as a chain into this greater instrument rack. And let's just name this pad. Now let's go to our piano sound here. Let's select this guy. Okay, go to instrument rack. Again, I don't want to drop it here because that's going to replace it. And in this situation, I'm going to put that here. And this is piano. Great, so we have pad. and we have piano set up. Those are our two sounds. Now I can delete these other MIDI tracks. Okay, and let's just call this piano pad. Have these two guys ready. With the track arm, now let's play it. Okay. So I have those two guys layered together. What I could do is go dig into those racks individually, change my filters. Push makes it really easy to choose exactly which sound I want, which instrument rack I want, if I'm going to adjust the operator or the effects, right? And so I can get to that really, really easily, which is nice. I can dig in, go to pad, could go to piano there, and adjust the settings on my piano if I wanted to make it brighter. Right, so that is some of the cool stuff I can do when I'm using push and I'm using live together with all these sounds combined. So I have a piano and I have a pad sound that's both layered into an instrument rack now. So I'm getting to be in a better place than I was before. So the other thing I want to do to this instrument rack now is let's save this. Let's call this pad piano combo. Okay, and we're going to hit save. This is going to save same place we were before. User library, presets, instruments, but now we're an instrument rack as opposed to operator. So we're going to save that. It's going to take a second to join all our samples together. And then let me show you how easy it is again to access this. So I'll open a new live set, hit don't save. Okay, and then now user library, again, instrument rack, going to go to pad piano combo and then drag this guy in and watch as that loads. And again, I can record arm this track. And I have those two sounds. So super, super easy to create our sound, save it, have access to it across all of our projects. But I'm just showing you right now with two sounds built into live. What if we want to use some other sounds? What if we want to use a sound from Reason, or maybe even sounds from the Nord or the Moog that we can combine and kind of add in? Let's see what we can do there. And actually, before we get to that, let me take you through some of the features of an instrument rack, dig a little deeper, and then we'll get into triggering some of the other sounds. So really quickly here on this instrument rack, there's a couple circles, a couple settings we want to run through. First is our on-off for the instrument rack. That's our activator. Next thing is our macro controls. And what's nice, you could see, especially on this piano and the pad, we have a lot of our macros pre-mapped here. We could go in here and remap these guys to this one. We also could go in here and map all enclosed macros to this. We probably do not want to do that though, because we'll end up mapping all the macros for both pad and piano here. But that could be useful if we just had one sound loaded in. So I have all these different macros here. I could say, okay, volume for piano, let's map this to macro 1. And let's say volume for pad, we can map to macro 2. And then we can name it. We could assign it to a MIDI controller if we had a MIDI controller set up that we want to do that. And then now I have really quick access to volume for those two sounds. And again, what's really cool about that is that's going to save across all my projects, and when I bring that sound back in, it's going to be available and saved. That mapping is going to be saved to that macro automatically, which is really cool. So that's our macros. The next thing we can do is look at our chain list. And so what this means, if we think of an instrument rack as wrappers, as layers, the chain list is going to show us each layer that is in the instrument rack. So we have piano, we have pad, we could have multiple layers. I remember one summer getting a call from a student. He said, I'm having this issue with this instrument rack with the sound alive that's just blowing up my CPU. I can't handle, the computer can't handle everything it's taking. And he said, I don't understand why. It's a small little preset. And I said, we're using an instrument rack. And what ended up happening is he had this collapse that looks innocent enough. It's a small little preset. But when he started to expand it, he saw there were multiple chains. And with the instrument rack, we can put nest a rack within a rack, within a rack, within a rack. So you can look and see at the piano one here, we have this instrument rack, Then we have emotional piano. And if I go here and right click, you'll see all the different layers that's in this sound, right? So we can go incredibly, incredibly deep when we're talking about instrument racks and sound design and programming when we're in Ableton Live, which is really, really cool. So that's our chain list. We can do some cool stuff with our chains, like filter by key, by velocity, and then by what's called the chain selector. And we'll talk about this here in a moment. The best way to think about key is we can choose sounds that play on the keyboard. Maybe only this sound, we'll do a split, is in the left hand. This sound is in the right hand. Velocity is how hard or soft we hit a key. So when I hit the keys really hard, I want this sound to make noise. When I play it really soft, I want this to make noise. Chain selector is, again, essentially a preset in our keyboard. And we say, let's go to preset 1, preset 2, and we're going to pull that guy up. And we'll talk about that here in a moment, which is great. So the last thing we have is the ability to show or hide devices. So this is our device browser. And the showing or hiding devices just makes it really easy to see what devices are loaded into our chain. So we could hide the chain list and we just see the macros, or we could hide everything so that we see that. Devices, showing that is going to help to kind of decipher, okay, what do I have loaded in here? This just says instrument rack, but I can double click this, show the device. Okay, now I have operator, Ableton effects, right? That's going to help us kind of figure out what is loaded into each and what sounds are loaded into each. So that's a quick kind of deep dive into instrument racks. Now let's go back to where I said we were going to go here just a little bit ago and talk about how to add external sounds into this. Let's start talking about using sounds and patches from Reason. So I'm going to open Reason up here. And I have some sounds from Nick Staley. This is his Essential Pads collection, I believe, for Reason. And it's a Prophet pad and Massive pad. Let me grab a drink of water here. And these are both available on multitracks.com that you can purchase. And I just have these loaded into Reason, and they are combinators, which is really similar to an instrument rack in Live, right? A combinator is going to layer multiple sounds, and I believe he might be using Thor to generate these, I'm not sure. He's got a filter pre-mapped, but I have both of these sounds loaded in as combinators, and the way they are mapped is I have them set to discrete outputs in Reason, which means this one's going out of output 1 and 2, and this one is out of output 3 and 4. And what I want to do is I want to be able to access these sounds from within Ableton Live without having to go back to Reason. So I have these loaded in. Let's go back to Live for a second. And we were talking about the instrument rack. I want to use something called the external instruments device. So I'm going to drop this in on a track just for a moment here. And let's look in the left-hand corner where it says MIDI to. We want to choose where we're going to send our MIDI to. And right now, I want to send it to Reason. So these are connected via Rewire. Ableton Live is our host, and Reason is slaved to Ableton Live. So I want to choose to send this MIDI to Reason. And I want to choose what device this is going to send to. So the first one here is Prophet Pad. And then I can play this. And you go, man, this is frustrating. Why am I not hearing anything? If you look up there at the top, 1/2 is our mix. Now we can play it. Right, and we are hearing a discrete output from Reason into Ableton Live. That's the Prophet Pad. That is this guy over here. Prophet Pad in Reason, I'm sending MIDI from Live. Right, and that is selecting that. Now what I could do is create another MIDI track, add another external instrument device here, and let's add that one in. So we'll do Reason, and let's do Massive Pad is our other one here, and audio is to 3 and 4. And again, these are discrete separate outputs. So really cool kind of detuned, great sounding pad that Nick did. And again, I could select these sounds just like we were talking about earlier. But what if I want to combine these sounds with the sounds I already have in Live? What if I want to make them layers within that instrument rack, or maybe even add a auto filter from Live on those? It's super, super easy. So similar to what we did before, let's take, I really like this Prophet pad. So let's take that external instrument, drop it into this instrument rack. We'll double check all our routing now and watch what happens when we play that sound. So let me select that guy. Let's play it. Right, so I have those 3 sounds loaded in. Now again, what's really cool, we're taking audio from Reason back into Live, so it's super easy to add an auto filter just on that external instrument sound there. So we could play this. And now I am layering my pad sound that I have from Ableton Live, the pad sound from Reason with a filter together with that piano sound. So those all three are layered. And what's cool is I took this filter and I put it just on the rack in Reason. I did not put it on everything. So listen to the difference here. This is just within this chain, which is just this Reason pad. We'll call this Reason pad so you can visually see that. If I move it outside of the instrument rack, watch what happens. Right, so now we kind of lose the ability to hear everything because we're doing a low pass filter, only letting the low end pass through on everything, piano, both the pads. That's not very effective, right? I mean, it sounds great, but depending on what you're trying to do, you probably want the piano to have a different filter than your pad stuff. So I'm going to drop this back on just on this chain. So what's worth noting when we talk about instrument racks is we can do parallel processing, which means I'm processing the Reason pad separately from the Ableton pad, separately from the piano pad, but we're layering them all together, right? So as opposed to a guitar player who plugs in and when she plays her guitar, it's going to play through the delay pedal, through the drive pedal, through the verb pedal, and depending on how those instruments are placed in the chain, depends on what the end result sounds like. We're treating this more as I'm always going to have my clean guitar signal or these different paths I'm going down. I can maybe have 5 different guitar signals, but at the end they get merged together into one output, right? So that's what's happening in this case. Pad, piano, and the Reason pad sound together with just the filter. So again, it's a bit of what that sounds like. And I have my filter here where I could just filter our Reason pad, which makes that really, really usable, right? Now let's talk about a bit of that keyboard mapping, mapping by key that we talked about earlier. So I could go to key here and you see I have these ranges in different zones and I can choose which sounds play in which parts of the keyboard. So let's take this Reason pad and let's have it just play maybe higher up. Let's take this pad, have it play maybe just kind of the lower end of the keyboard, and for whatever reason in the middle is just going to be our piano, right? And then we have our Reason pad here. Right, so we hear a little bit of the Reason pad, a little bit of the Ableton pad here. And we could go in, clean up some of that reverb on our piano, increase our compression if we wanted. And again, push makes it so easy for me to get access to all the settings that I need to for my key sounds as I'm playing. It's really responsive. It's really easy to just kind of change the sounds as I'm playing them, which is great. So here is our instrument rack that we've set up. I want to get these back to where I have pad and piano for most of this, but let's just have that Reason pad in the upper part. And we'll do this. Again, we could do the same thing with velocity if we wanted to, but those are kind of our sounds there. Now, if you remember from the beginning, I talked about this Nord that I have set up here. I'm currently you're not hearing any sounds from the Nord. You also have not heard this guy yet, the Moog Sub 37. And I've got a bass preset just pulled up here, right? I want to add that into my pad and piano kind of preset here. But obviously I don't want it to where it happens high up on the keys. I only want it in the lower register of the keyboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this external instrument device, do the same exact thing I did earlier, and I'm going to drop this in on the rack. And let's hide this. And we want to do MIDI 2. And this time, if you remember in the beginning, I mentioned we're using this Mio here. This is the Mio 4 from iConnectivity. And on the back of this, I have the Nord set up for the DIN port 3. And DIN port 2 is the Moog. So that is doing a MIDI signal into the Moog. So what I'm going to do is on the external instrument device, go to DIN 2. And basically what that means is take the incoming MIDI signal, and I want you to send that to DIN 2 on the Mio. And then I have the Moog set up to receive MIDI on MIDI channel 2, I believe. We'll check and see here in a second. And so now when I select this, right? So if I just mute, or let's just mute these guys real quick. So we just hear. right? So that is the Moog. I'm not touching the Moog, I'm not playing it, but I'm over here using the Nord or using the push, right, to play bass sounds. And the way that's happening is using that external instruments device, I'm choosing to send MIDI to that, which is really great. So let's unsolo these. Let's just do the pads for a second. Again, really cool low end, but you start to hear this weird kind of glidey thing. Starts to almost sound like an Owl City song, which there's nothing wrong with that. I love Owl City, but it's not working great for my pad. And the reason is I only really want this in a specific range, really this note and lower. So what I'm gonna do is go back to my instrument rack. We're gonna hit key. Let's play this. All right, and let's move this guy for here and lower. Now if I play here, no Moog, but I can suddenly add my left hand in, and now we have these notes. Right, so that's super easy to integrate that into my setup. Now, similar to, or differently from what I did with Reason. Now, in Reason, I said I want that external instrument to choose audio and receive audio from Reason, get it back into live. I'm not choosing to do that. So I could use my iConnect Audio 2 Plus and plug the Moog into that, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do any processing on the Moog. So it's just connected directly to our soundboard, our Midas M32, just into a direct box, into an input there. So it's the same thing if I did this or did that. I'm playing the same note, but I'm doing it all from the Nord, which is really nice. So now I have that layer together. I have all those sounds included together in just one sound, which is great. Makes it super easy to access all those sounds and use all of those sounds. So again, if you guys have any questions, post those in the chat room. Looks like we got one here from Travis. He said, are you running audio with the iConnect Audio 4+2? I am not. So I am using it to prop up my PowerPlay P16. So sorry, iConnectivity, but you also make great interfaces that just hold up Behringer PowerPlay P16. So no, I'm not using an interface. I'm just doing headphone out of my computer just because it's super easy and I just happen to have that cable right there. But I could use the 2+, 4+, both those interfaces I like. So really good question, Travis. So we are using sounds from Reason, using sounds from Ableton Live. They're all loaded into an instrument rack. We're combining all them. We're doing key mapping. We're filtering sounds based on what key, where we are on the keyboard, which is great. So we're doing some cool stuff there. How do we do this live? So how do we take this from just this one sound and start to do this live? What if I want to switch from a pad sound to piano sound? How are we going to make that happen? So what's cool with instrument racks, we talked about key velocity. We didn't talk about that last filter, which is the chain selector. And what's really cool with the chain selector is the chain selector allows you to pick up and create presets within your instrument rack. So I can have up to 128, 0 to 127 presets that I can access at any time from my instrument rack. So it's super easy. Let me show you what that looks like. I can go to the chain select ruler here, or excuse me, select the chain. And over here we have in our zone editor, each of these is a zone. We're basically going to figure out, okay, which chain is this sound going to be in? So pad, piano, Reason pad, this external instrument, we'll name this Moog. Which preset do we want this to be in? So I can move this pad one to 1, move piano to 2, Reason pad to 3, and let's move the Moog here to 4. And again, I have chain 0 set as kind of my mute. That's what I like thinking of that as. That's a bit of my mute. So now if I play sounds now, right, great sounding keys. This is the moment where you set up Sunday morning and you get frustrated. You know, Ableton's a piece of junk. I knew I shouldn't have bought this Nord. You're ready to overturn the tables and throw over your laptop, kick it off the stand. And then you look back at live and realize, oh, I have it set to 0, to chain to be 0, which again means don't play any sounds. There's no chain set to when I put the chain selector to 0, there is nothing set there, so no sound should come out. Now, as soon as I move this though, watch what happens. right? So that is our pad sound that we're hearing right there. And we're only hearing that sound, even though all 4 of these sounds are loaded into my instrument rack, I'm only hearing that sound because it's the only sound in the chain. So if I move this, let's see what we hear now. We hear piano that is muted. There we go. Right, just our piano. Let's move this guy one more. Let's get our reason pad. Okay, and then now if we go to this chain here, let's hear what we have. Just our Moog, right? Again, I'm triggering from the Nord and playing the Moog. If I go up here, I don't hear anything because I have it mapped. See where it comes in here, all the way down, right? So that's my Moog sound. So what's really cool about this too is watch what happens. I can play, let's play this reason pad sound for a second. Right, I'm gonna hold that pad sound out. I'm gonna switch to piano. Now watch what happens. We're not hearing piano now. The pad is still playing, it hasn't cut off. I'm still holding the sustain pedal down. So let me start playing my piano sound here. Right? So as long as I hold that sustain pedal down, it's going to hold out that previous sound. As soon as I let go, it's going to fade out, but it's going to be a smooth fade. So it makes it super easy to transition. Again, let's try it one more time. From a pad sound, let's just hold it down. You can switch to my piano. So I'm over to piano. I haven't triggered anything yet. I'm still holding the sustain pedal down. I'm going to release it and then start playing piano. Let's see what happens. Right, and we could, just for the fun of it, right, there's our Moog. Okay, we got our Moog in. So again, super easy to switch between those sounds. But you'll notice that even though I'm doing that, and that's great, it's not very practical in a live situation to play and then reach over and switch. Okay, I'm back to piano pad. That's not very useful to do that in a live situation. So let me show you another way we can access that information. One, we could map that chain select ruler to a macro and use a MIDI controller to do that, which could be cool. But what's really neat is we can use a MIDI clip. So I'm going to go and create a MIDI clip here in this blank clip slot. And we're going to call this preset 1. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this. And we'll just make, let's make a few of these, see what we got. Okay, so I have all those clips loaded in, which is great. And let's just change what each of these guys are mapped to, which would be cool. So preset 1, I'm going to go here, hit this E. And this E here means it's going to open our envelopes box. And we want to go to, and live there's these 2 boxes pretty consistent. Anytime you can do any automation, we see these 2 boxes. The first one is called the device chooser. You can see lots of devices in this instrument rack. The other one is our control chooser. We choose a device like our mixer. What control on that mixer do we want to map? We want to map our volume. We want to map our pan. So in this situation, I want to make sure I'm on this instrument rack, which the name of it here is pad piano combo, and I want to choose chain selector. What's nice is I can move this, all right, and that's going to say which chain, which preset do I want to select. In this case, we're going to select 1 for preset 1. Let's go to 2, and it remembers the last automation, the last parameter I was working when I go to do automation. So all I need to do is just move this to 2. Let's go to 3, move that to 3, go to 4. And now we can move that to 4. So now what's cool about this is let's trigger this guy, and that's going to select preset 1. So as I play, right, that's going to play that pad sound. Now let's play maybe our piano sound. So, and I lost MIDI. Let's go back and arm that track. There we go. Now we're cooking. Right, so I can go here. So that is my piano sound. And let's see if I can trigger, what else do we want? Next one is our reason pad. Again, it's smooth, it's a smooth transition. Back to our reason pad. Let's go to our first pad here. Okay, I'm using my push to trigger and pull up whatever preset I want. So here's my bass. Right, so I've got that added in, which is nice. Let's get back to our piano. Now, one thing you might notice, I'm doing all this in session view. One of the downsides to this, which is one of the upsides to running tracks in Ableton Live, is something called global quantization, which means as soon as I trigger something, it doesn't happen right away. If you ever ran tracks and not using Ableton Live, and the very first time you did it, maybe from an iPod, you tried to press play and get it just right to get the start right, that's a disaster. When we get into live, we can use global quantization, and it syncs everything up so the next downbeat, everything's going to be triggered, which is great. Now, when we're in this situation and we're triggering presets on our push or reaching over and triggering clips, it's not a great situation because we have to wait till that next downbeat. But there's one thing we could do, and I want to show you how we can change this so that it's going to happen immediately and make it a little better as a keys player. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to click on this L, which is called my launch box. And when I click this, I want to change the quantization. Instead of being global, let's set it to none. And I'm going to do that for all 4 of these guys. So we're going to click on our global quantization in our launch box and set that to none. Now what that means is if I happen to trigger a scene that has one of those clips in it, it's going to wait for that scene to trigger to the next downbeat of 1. But this clip in the scene is going to go immediately, which is great. So in this scenario, again, let's start with our reason pad. Let's bring in our piano. Again, notice it's going to pull up piano immediately. Let me show you so you can see that. It doesn't cut the pad sound like it did before when we were switching. And then I can go right to my piano. I want to bring some of that reverb back. Increase some of the shimmer, brighten it up maybe. Go to pad. Right, so that makes it incredibly simple, both with a push and with changing the quantization mode on those clips to being none. Makes it really simple to go through and trigger all those as a keys player. Now, this is great. We could extend this though and say, what if we were to take all our sounds and maybe program them by sections, by song sections, or by songs. On this song, I want these sounds pulled up, these sounds ready to go. That would be very cool to do, but you would then have to take your instrument rack, create all your clips, preset all those, do a lot of work to get it to that place. But I want to show you something very cool which we have yet to announce, and I think we have a slide for it. Let's see if Tyler can pull that up. And this is something called, actually I forgot what we called it, Ableton Keys Template. There you go. This is a brand new keys template that we are announcing today that I believe will be out Friday. That is very cool that you guys are going to love. And so what I want to do here in a second is take you guys through what that looks like and how you can use that. So let's see if I can open this up. Here we go. So what the keys template is it makes it incredibly, don't save, makes it incredibly simple and easy to use key sounds in a live situation. So I just added these guys earlier. We'll forget about these momentarily. But what all of these are is each of these are an instrument rack. And this is our piano instrument rack, this is our pad instrument rack, and this is our lead instrument rack. And the reason we did this is Ableton Live can only use one core per track, right? So if we loaded all our sounds into one massive instrument rack, I used to do this, If our computer has 4 cores or 2 cores, it can only use one of those 2 or one of those 4 cores per track. So we're not using all the processing power that our computer could offer. So what's best is it's great to split those up, and it also makes it easier to route your outputs. If I remember, if someone asks or wants to know this, I'll show you how we can do multiple outputs from one instrument rack, which is kind of cool, but it's a big process, a long process. This is really easy because we're keeping pianos to a piano track, pads to a pad track, lead sounds to leads, bass to bass, so on and so forth. And with this template, we've pre-mapped all 127 presets that you have access to from a clip. So let me show you how easy it is to use this. So I was messing with this earlier, so I think I need to delete this guy. Nope, I cleared it out, perfect. So I'm gonna work just with this piano track. Oh yeah, there we go, I got that loaded in already. So I'm gonna delete this instrument rack, and what I'm gonna do is just drop in that pad piano combo that I was using earlier. Drop that right into keys 1. So it's going to take a second to load. All right, cool. So this guy is loaded in now, and let me trigger, let's turn these guys off. All right, and let me trigger this. And let's record enable our track, armor track there. All right, and turn my master up. There we go. So this is that same sound we were working with earlier, but I'm just using the pad sound part of it now, and let's put the pad and piano back together. If I wanted to maybe have a preset that was just pad and piano together, I could do this. I could split these up a little more if I wanted. Right, so in this scenario, when I'm here, I have piano and pad. Okay, and then if I go here, this is just piano, right, which is kind of nice. Now, so we've got these guys loaded into keys preset 1, but let's go ahead and just pre-fill some of these with a few other options. So keys 2, I'm gonna go to my desktop here and just see, or let's go to this Ableton patches folder, see what we have in here. And I'm just gonna load some of these sounds into here that we can use. Again, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask those away. Keys 2, I'm going to drag this track in for a second. 80s Pad Heaven, this is one of my favorite pad sounds. This is from Radiant Pads. Go to keys 2, drop that right on the instrument rack. All right, and now I can trigger this one. Okay. Right? And I have that pad sound ready to go. Now, let's say I want to reuse this, but maybe my next preset, again, we're thinking of these as presets, maybe my next preset, I want to have that with like a sidechain effect. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually copy this, or I'm going to cheat a little bit and hold Alt Option as I drag this. And I'm going to move this to keys, the chain 3 for keys 3. Then I'm going to go up again, grab Ableton Effects, just makes it really easy to work on this. And let's go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this because I do have a reverb and filter kind of plugged in. But let's go and take the reverb amount and increase that, increase the decay, and blend here. And let's do effect type 1. Shimmer is down. Let's filter it a little. And now let's trigger key sound 3. Right? So that's great. Now I'm kind of breaking my rules though, and I didn't do this correctly because I have piano sounds here and I have pad sounds here. So I'm going to actually just show you how easy it is to take this, now that I have these two guys, and let's just group these together into another instrument rack, and let's move this to our pad sound. Okay, so we're going to put this in our instrument rack for pads, drop it into keys 3, and let's load that guy in. Okay, so we have that loaded into keys 3 now for our pad sounds. Let's go to key sound 2. Let's see what we have here. Back in pianos, we'll drop just that 80s Pad Heaven again here. Okay, replace that. And let's just put one more pad in here just for the heck of it. Let's do something from the Ambient Textures collection. Oh, this one is another one of my favorites, Tons of Sounds. Put this in. And this will be our pad sound 1. So again, super easy, just dropping these guys in. Cool. Tons of Sounds, 80s Pad Heaven. and then here's our layered thing here. And now we have our piano sounds pulled up. Let's go back here, and let's actually just start over. Let's delete that one, and let's add in just some piano sounds. So give me a second here. I'll find some piano sounds, and I'll load in two of my favorite ones, emotional piano, and then we'll load in alter, which is a much darker piano sound. And there we go. Actually, let's do alter with subtle delay. This gives us a little bit of difference here. All right. So now I've got these tracks loaded in, and let's load these into this piano rack. We'll do keys 1 and keys 2. All right, keys 1. Let that load. And then let's do keys 2. All right. So now what I want to do is enable both of these tracks. I'll set the monitor to in so that I don't have to deal with the record enabling all these clips. And let's just stop this for a second here. We'll do stop all clips. And then let's see. And I'll hit save once this guy, there we go. Save it. All right, so now let's figure out what sounds we want to load. So I want to load piano sound 1. And again, we can go to launch, see global quantization set to none. So these are preset and ready to trigger right when you need them to work right at the right time. And let's do this pad sound here, keys 2. I'm going to delete this lead track for a moment. And I'll talk about what these other tracks are here in a second too. So now when I play, right? And let's see if we can bring this filter down a little. There we go. Then we'll get our piano going. Right, so that makes it super, super easy for me to choose exactly what sound I'm going to use to lay into my set. Now, let me show you one other thing. We've been, again, hanging out in session view. I love using session view when I'm playing keys because I do get kind of a cool layout where I can see exactly what sounds are loaded in what, especially when I'm using push. I can choose, okay, I want this preset here and this preset here, and then I can just choose exactly what sounds I want. So it makes it super easy. The clips light up too, change different colors, so it makes it kind of fun when you're using push for key stuff. But again, makes it really, really simple and easy to change sounds, to select sounds, and do a lot of really cool stuff when I'm using push and using an instrument rack like this. So I tend to prefer session view when I'm running keys and using key sounds. But if you like to run tracks in arrangement view, or if you're trying to run tracks on one machine and you're using arrangement view, what if we could, instead of having to go in and manually choose our sounds, pre-program our sounds to change at a specific time? So what's cool, I can use this same keys template and I can go over here into arrangement view, go to piano and do the same automation that I was doing over to the right here, using the chain selector. So I can select the chain selector, go to instrument rack, chain selector, or to make it easy on myself, let's figure out which piano we have. Emotional piano, so I'm going to choose keys 1 clip, and I'm just going to paste this in here. And then for as long as I want that to run, I'm going to choose this guy, right? Oops, excuse me. I'm going to duplicate that. There we go. All right, so let's have keys 1. Oh, and she's on her own. Give her a second to catch up. There we go. And let's figure out tons of sounds we want to use here. We'll copy that. Again, we'll paste this here and just duplicate a few times. So we have it set up to where we just have key sounds there, just our piano sound, and then our key sound. And let's see what happens, and then we'll do both for a little bit. So I am at 120 BPM. I'm going to turn off back to arrangement. So I go back to the arrangement. And when I press play, we can see, let's see if this guy worked. Chain selector 1, right? We got that pulled up. And then when we get here, you'll see, and I'll play this, chain selector 1 there. and this is set to nothing right now. So that's going to just keep what was there previously. So now let's press play. So there's just our piano. Okay, I'm going to hold it out. It's not going to stop sustaining, but now when I play, I have pad, and I'm adding to that piano that I added earlier. Right, so that makes it super simple. As our arrangement changes, all we have to do all the work to pre-program it in session view, just load our samples in. I suggest when you're working with the keys template, do your work to figure out your sounds outside of this template, save them into the browser, and then from there bring those into the keys template. And this is the master template you're going to open up and you're going to use as you're playing tracks, as you're using keys stuff, which is really, really great way to do this. Now, a couple last things I want to show you and talk about. And then again, if you have any questions, just let us know and we will do our best to answer those. Matthew, yeah, this is a good question. What's my current buffer setting? So right now my buffer is 64, so it's pretty low. As I go to add, and that's a great question, Matthew. If you've ever opened Ableton Live and you go to play, you've got Ivory going or you've got Omnisphere going and you play and it's just crackling and it's popping and it sounds awful. What happens is your buffer is set too low. And as you decrease your buffer, it's going to reduce the latency when you play. So you want as low of a buffer setting as you can because there's less latency. So that when I hit a key, and latency is just the delay between when I hit a key and I hear it. So we want to keep that set as low as possible. But the more key sounds we start to add, the more CPU intensive those are, then you're going to start to get those cracks and pops. So if you do, you just increase your buffer size so that those go away. Now, you hopefully will land in a sweet spot where you're either bad enough as a player like I am, where you're not going to play lots of notes, you'll play a few, so you're fine at a lower buffer setting. You don't use tons and tons of key sounds or not very CPU intensive sounds, and you're going to try to land in the middle. So it's a bit of a dance. As a laptop musician, as someone using a laptop in Ableton Live for key sounds, you're just going to have to work at it to find kind of what that sweet spot looks like with your buffer and with latency to get that set. So great question, Matthew. But yes, my buffer right now is set to 64. Latency is not bad at all. It's working great for me, kind of where it is. And again, as I add more sounds, if I start to get the cracking and popping going, I would increase that. So very, very good question. So last thing I want to talk about, and again, if you have any questions, let us know. We'll answer those, and then we might hang out in the chat room for a little bit, is how do we solve, and kind of virtually raise your hand, let us know if you guys use Live for key stuff now. And if you do, you're probably running into a problem that we all have faced. And let me show you what that problem is. I'll try to get this set here so that you can see that. But it's the problem of, let me get a pad sound going. All right, and let's use that tons of sounds sound again. All right. So I step on stage. I just bought Ableton Live. I just bought my push. I've got the world's most expensive MIDI controller, my Nord, to do nothing but just play keys. And I'm ready to go. The pastor's praying. Okay, we're running tracks. We do the first song, we're good, we're playing. Okay, and then as the worship set's starting to end, the pastor's coming up. So what do we have to do? We have to hit stop on Ableton Live, and this happens. And we're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And our pad cuts out, right? That is the number one issue, probably besides managing buffering and latency that I hear with people when they're running tracks and using Live for key sounds. So I want to show you how to solve this problem once and for all. So if you're watching this webinar and you walk away with anything else, walk away with this. So this is a bit like when you go to the doctor and you say, hey doc, every time I do this with my ear, it hurts. What's the doctor going to say? He's going to say, well, stop doing that and it's going to stop hurting. So the way to solve your problem, it's going to sound a little funny, is stop pressing stop and Live, and it will stop stopping your keyboard. So let me explain what's happening first, and then I promise, don't sign off yet. I'll show you how to do this and what I mean by this. So when I play keys and I press play, Live is running, it's sending MIDI information. I'm sending MIDI information from here to there, like what note I'm playing, how hard, how long that should be held out for. As soon as I stop though, Live is gonna send a stop all MIDI or stop all notes message, which is gonna go back to my keyboard and cut off MIDI, right? So we don't want that to happen. So again, the easy solution is don't ever press stop, right? And you're going, wow, Will, that's great, you know, thanks for nothing, that didn't help. But let me show you exactly what I mean by that. So here's an example of, let's say we're running our set in session view. And I'm just gonna program in some tempos here really quick. And let's say 120, 85 BPM. Okay, and let's say 75 BPM. All right, and let's clean up our set. And then what I wanna do, let's go in and let's use our advanced Ableton template and let's load in our click clips here. So we're gonna do 4/4 and we're in 4/4 for all these. Yep, so we'll just duplicate these guys. Got my pad sound going. And now let's trigger sound 1 here. Okay, and I'm gonna show you what I'm setting up here. All right, so we've got this guy going. And I'm going to just really quickly key assign these guys. I actually have my push, so I could probably just use that. And let's see if we can call up. Let's do song 3. Okay. So there's our click. Let's keep this guy set to in. Right. So there's our key sound. So again, the problem happens here typically. Right, so we have our key sound going. Problem happens when we do this. We reach up and we press stop. That's gonna stop our click. But instead of pressing stop this time, what I'm gonna do is press play. Right? Then let's go to song 4. Okay, so let me explain what happened there, and I want to do one more change. So instead of hitting stop to stop the click, and I'm using foundations here, which is kind of the secret sauce to make this work. So I'm using Live's click. I'm going to continue to hear the click in this section. But what I've done is I've treated scene 1 as my stop scene. So again, don't go to the doctor and say, this hurts when I pull my ear. He's going to say, stop pulling your ear. Don't hit stop when you're using keys, because the way to stop Live stopping your keys is stop hitting stop, right? That's the lesson here. So what we're going to do is use a scene and call that stop. And what we do is we just put a MIDI clip in that scene. If you look over at my live set, I'm using Foundation, so I have the 3 Foundations clips loaded in, and then I've just got a MIDI clip there, just default MIDI clip, loaded in so that I can trigger that, and I've got this set to stop. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this to 1/1, and if I wanted, I could just boost up the BPM of this if I wanted to, but I'm going to just leave it to 1/1, and I'll show you why. So again, let's trigger a click. Okay, we get our pad going. Right, and so we want to stop, so we're going to hit stop there, and we are stopped. Now, earlier when I pressed push to go to my next song, you'll notice it took a little bit, right? It took a while for it to trigger, but because we're set our time signature to 1/1, now pretty much right when I hit that, the next click's going to start. Right, and we start right away. And then at the very end of our set, again, we can hit stop, and that's going to stop our click and keep it going, and we could walk up at any point and play our pad, which is really, really nice. Now, let me show you, if you're running tracks in arrangement view, how to do a similar thing. So instead of a stop clip, or stop scene rather, we want to create a locator that's going to be set to stop. So same exact kind of process here. And let's turn off back to arrangement. And let's create a couple locators. Let's say we have song 1. Say we have song 2. And eventually song 3. All right, so these are our 3 songs. And let's set a tempo for these, which again, let's use our handy advanced Ableton template here. There we go. Do 83 for this guy. Do 100 for this guy. And then let's say 121. Right, so super simple to kind of build my set, get it going here. On the very first one, let's change that to master. Actually, let's do that to all of these. Okay, so that is controlling our tempo automation now. 53, we're at 100, and then 121, you can see the tempo changing there. Let's add our click in, just like we had before. All right. And drop these guys in. And these are going to be the same across all of these, so I'm just going to play them. So this is what we have. Right, there's our 121 click, there's our 100 BPM click, and then finally our, what is that, 53, very, very slow song that we're doing, or very, very fast song, depending on how you count it. So there are our 3 tempos. Now what I'm going to do for this last one here is let's create one more locator, and let's call this stop, right? I'm going to set my time signature change here to 1-1, and then we can go back to the beginning here, make sure all these guys are set to 4-4, which looks like they are. Let's do this guy. Right, so all these songs are 4-4. This last one here is 1-1. Now what I could do, again, let's map keys with this guy. And let's delete our key mappings for all our scenes. Okay, so now song 1, song 2, 3, 4, there's our stop clip. So, and let's put some time in here. Oops. Let's insert maybe 20 measures just so we have a little bit of space here. So we'll extend this out, and then we'll move our time signature change maybe to right there. So that's going to give us a little bit of time, and then we'll move our stop clip. So basically what we want to do is we're going to program our set, get everything going, and then at the very, very tail end of the set, that's where we're going to add our last locator, and we're going to call it the stop locator. Okay, so here we go. If I play through this, everything's going. I have my pad sound going, right? Everything's great. Same exact problem if I were to hit spacebar, then it's going to cut off, right? We don't want that to happen. So instead of hitting spacebar, we want to press stop on our keyboard here. So let's press play. Okay, I can switch to my songs, but now I'm just going to trigger my stop locator, right? Which is going to keep running over and over and over. Let's go to song 2. Where the our time signature was 1-1 again, so it triggers pretty quickly. Now we're in song 3. So the cool thing about this, when we're doing this in arrangement view, we'll create our locator, we'll call it our stop locator, put it at the end of our set so it just runs infinitely, which is nice. The other thing we could do is we could use the IEC driver and create a clip instead of a stop clip, create basically our jump back to our previous locator button, and then that's just going to keep looping that locator over and over if we want to do that. So if it's between 2 songs, maybe song 1, song 2, then in between those 2 songs, we want to just loop that over and over, which is going to be great, and that's going to work for us. So I think we've kind of reached the end of it. Let's see if we have any other questions. I don't see any other questions. If you have questions, again, plug those in, post those in the chat room. We would love to hear them. Chat room, it sounds like we're on Instant Messenger. Put them on Facebook chat, YouTube, wherever you're watching from. Last thing I want to share with you is we have a very, very, where can I find that click back? Well, lucky you, Tim is going to post a link. Let's see how fast he can work to Foundations for Live, which is the click that I'm using that's available on multitracks.com for purchase. That gives you a bunch of really cool options that I think you'll enjoy. So that's Foundations for Live. So last thing, for those of you that are watching and those of you that are watching live, you get to take advantage of this. We have a very, very special discount. If you use this code till the end of the day, Ableton Keys, that's going to give you 30% off on any keys bundle that I have produced that's on the site. So if you go to multitracks.com/patches, you can click on my name and see the patches I've produced, and you can get 30% off. That's just for the next day. And so make sure if you're going to do that, you're watching this live, that you go ahead and do that now as soon as you can. And that's going to get you that discount. So I think that's it. Let's see if we have any other questions coming in. If not, we will hang out for a bit in the chat room. Just say, hey, I'm really, really excited for the rest of this year. We have a ton of webinars scheduled, planned, both kind of intro, basic, beginner webinars, as well as more advanced stuff. And I want to come back and do some more keys, sound design stuff. So how to create great sounds in Ableton Live, do some really cool stuff, how to use Mainstage with Ableton Live, how to use Omnisphere with Ableton Live. So do me a favor, in the comments as you're watching this, just let us know what's the kind of stuff you want to learn, what's the type of webinars you want to see and listen to, and we'll comment right back, but would love to hear that. And again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for being a part of this. It's a blast to be able to do this. We love talking about Ableton Live and kind of helping to equip churches do what they do better and lead worship well. So if you guys have any questions, as always, go to multitracks.com/support. But again, thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care. And again, we'll be hanging out in the chat room for a little bit and love to say, hey, thanks, guys. See ya.